Welcome to the AmericanaMusic.com podcast with your host, Sarah Popejoy.
Today on Americana Music Podcast, we welcome Zach John King. He's recently signed with Sony Music Nashville and has already performed at the Country to Country Festival, which is a huge 3-day country music festival in London, Glasgow, and Belfast. Country poet meets Americana-leaning sound that's hard driving. His new EP, Slow Down, drops this Friday. Currently playing on Highway XM and high-profile playlists, we are excited to have Zach John King. Welcome, Zach.
Howdy, howdy. Thank you for having me.
Zach, you grew up in Fayetteville, Georgia. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like growing up there?
Yeah, I tell everybody, it used to be a lot smaller town than it is now. The movie studios, like all the Marvel movies and stuff, we had a ton of farmland south of downtown, and they all moved their studios out there. So like when I was growing up, it was farms, and then by the time that I went to college, it was movie studios. So the town's growing, but it's still, the part I live in is technically Brooks, Georgia. It's your typical, I don't use run-of-the-mill in a derogatory way. I just use it as like there's not much to it in Fayetteville, Georgia. But I love it. It's like where all my family's still from. My dad was born and raised there. His mom was born and raised there. So it goes way back. And for me, it was just, it's simplicity. And I think the older I get and the more places I get to travel, the more I come to appreciate that simplicity and that slower pace of life. And I love it. I'm proud of where I came from. It's a beautiful town and I'm proud to be from there.
That's cool. That's cool. I noticed that your musical influences, they're kind of all over the map.
Yes.
Can you talk about some of those influences?
Being from a town as small as Fayetteville, the whole DNA of a southern town, especially for me, was growing up on country music. My grandparents had a little radio in their cabinet, and that was what they listened to. They only listened to country music. And so you grow up there in this bubble. The only exposure you're getting is country music. And I think that's something where you don't shy away from it. You don't dislike it, but that's all you know. And then I get to high school, and it's like, well, that's my grandparents' music. There's this weird thing that happens where you start wanting something else. You want to be different. You know, everybody wants to be different. So I broke away from it, and I was like chasing anything other than country music pretty much all of high school and fell in love with indie rock. Honestly, like that's where I kind of ended up. So I loved the Strokes, and I loved Radiohead, and I loved Kings of Leon are still my favorite band in the world. I think you get a little older, and I got to college, and like I said, I fell back in love with where I came from, and I started becoming proud of being from Fayetteville, Georgia, and proud of where I came from and what I grew up on. So I try to mix all those indie influences with the traditional country that I grew up on, and I think we meet somewhere in the middle with my music, and I think when you listen to it, you hear that.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I think it's something about maybe leaving home, you know, that you kind of...
Yeah, it's like you don't really appreciate where you're coming from until you get away from it. And you also, I think there's this weird thing with like growing up, you just want to be something different for just the sake of being different. And then you realize that like, no, my people are pretty great, you know? I love where I came from for sure.
When did you start writing songs and what came first? Was it the singing, the performance aspect of it, or was it writing songs?
I think writing songs came first. I come from my great uncle was a published poet. And I remember we have copies of his poetry in our little family living room. And so poetry was in there. Like he was a poet. And then my grandma on my mom's side, every time she would travel with my granddad, and they loved to travel, instead of journaling, she would write simple A-B rhyme poetry about where they went. So growing up, like if I wanted to know how their trip to Alaska was, instead of it being like a journal, it was poetry. I grew up with like that kind of instilled in me from an early age and started writing. I loved writing. I was terrible at math. I was terrible at most subjects in school, but like for some reason, writing and literature came so easily to me. So yeah, I think the writing side of things started it all. And then you start trying to sing and you get a little bit better and you figure out how to do it. And that's to me, the beauty of country music is it's always about the storytelling and it's always about the lyrics. You can have the best voice in the world, but if the storytelling element isn't in a song for country music, people aren't going to relate to it as much.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. I really love that, the poetry through line you had in your family, because I just interviewed someone here maybe about a month ago or so who they had that same through line of poetry in their family as well. So that's really cool.
Really grateful for it, for sure.
You were in an indie rock band in college, and you landed on singing and performing country music. I know you talked a little bit about that journey, but can you talk a little more about that from the point where you were in the indie rock band to deciding that country music was your path?
Like I said, I think I wanted to break away from everything that I grew up on for a little while. And I think, you know, high school hit, you start falling in love with alternative. Fast forward all the way to Athens, Georgia, and there's a vibrant history.
Oh.
Wonderful, wonderful indie indie rock there.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
Yeah, so we moved there and started a band. Me and my buddies from high school cut our teeth for 4 years. It was a beautiful time. Like, I credit almost all of my skill set and persistence now to that moment in time, because you learn so much of being in a band and being particularly in an indie band where it's DIY. It's like everything you're doing is by yourself. There's no one helping you. You're doing it all. And so I loved it. I had a blast. And then, yeah, COVID hit. And I remember at that point in time, I had started to kind of fall back in love with where I came from. Like, I missed home a little bit, and I was growing to where I was identifying myself more with where I came from and those traditional Southern qualities that I've, now come to love. And I fell back in love with the songwriting and the storytelling of country music. And it kind of started from the old school stuff that I grew up on with my grandparents. So I fell in love with Patsy Cline early, and then kind of, found her again. And then I worked my way all the way up into modern country. And by that point, I was just head over heels in love with the idea of like writing. And COVID closed the door on the band. And it was one of those things where I was just like, all right, if we're going to make this a career, we've got to go. And so we just went for it. And I think it was one of those things where it's just terrifying. Didn't know anybody in Nashville, didn't know how to do it. I just knew what I wanted to do, and I wanted to write country music. And so I still have a soft spot in my heart for indie rock and Athens, and just beautiful people there. But for me, it was falling back in love with the songwriting of country music that really just like fired me up.
Cool. How has your background in the indie rock influenced the music that you write and perform now? Or how is it different from what you do? Were there any, mental adjustments other than the style of country music? Any other things that you noticed that were just totally different approaches?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is the alternative indie rock stuff is built out of trying to be different. And that's beautiful. Like, that's what makes it so cool to listen to. And then in country music, you're writing it for the people. You're writing it for the neighbors that you have down the street. You're writing it for the everyday blue collar guy. And so I think what I learned really quickly is there's not too much room to be somebody you're not in country. And I think that's like probably the most beautiful thing about it is you're best suited in country music to be as authentic as you possibly can. And so it's a lot more simple in some ways. Writing music is simple in the sense that you're writing it from things you know, but then it's not simple when it comes to like being in Nashville, because you got the best songwriters on the planet for country music all within, 4 square miles of each other down here. And it's like, you better be good. So that's probably the biggest separation from like the indie world to the country world, is kind of why you're writing songs and who you're writing them for. But then musically, I mean, we're trying to keep both elements in my song. And so we're not abandoning what I love to play. And so it's guitar heavy. It's using different tones that you wouldn't necessarily find in a country song. But then it's every song I record pretty much has a banjo or pedal steel in it. And so just those traditional elements too that I absolutely love are always in there.
I thought I heard a lot of banjo in there.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, wait, I think this song has banjo too, or am I hearing things? Sometimes it's down in the mix, but it's in there.
Most every song, it has a banjo in it. I love that instrument so much.
Well, it's really cool. The way you used it in your songs is very rhythmic.
Thank you.
So the first single of the EP, Slow Down, which is also the name of the album, was written by you and Thomas Archer, Kyle Fishman, and Michael Tyler.
Yep.
The song is the story of someone haunted by the memory of their ex. It has a great hook. You've been running through my mind and you won't slow down. I love that. I just love that. That's great. Can you talk a little bit about that song?
Yeah, absolutely. I think anybody that grew up in a smaller community or a smaller town understands this idea of if you're trying to not be reminded of somebody or something, it's really hard in a town where you know every spot, you know every stop sign and stoplight, you know every corner store. And so this idea is, for me, my hometown still has these visceral reminders of relationships that I've been in. That won't change, and there's really not much room to get away from it because you're just kind of driving in circles. That's a pretty typical country story, but for us, it was really honest, and also the instrumentation and the storytelling of it felt really genuine to me in those indie rock influences. So it's a true story about not being able to escape somebody's memory in a town really too small not to be reminded about her, but it's also got these influences that I grew up with, like the Kings of Leon and indie rock in those instrumentations. So I'm really proud of that song, and I remember when we wrote it, it just was like one of those, we wrote it fast, and it just from the day one, it just felt really good and really right. right.
That's always a good feeling, isn't it?
It doesn't happen often, but when it happens, it's fantastic. Yeah.
For the video of the song, Slow Down, you're riding in the bed of a truck, driving a four-wheeler, and standing in front of a bonfire. Can you talk a little bit about shooting that video in your home state of Georgia?
Yeah, it was the first music video I've ever been a part of. And, we were throwing out all kinds of ideas. I think the original plan was to do kind of a typical Nashville thing, find somewhere here in Tennessee where we could stage it. And I just wanted that visual to be so representative of where I came from. And so I was like, we got to shoot it on my cousin's property in Monticello, Georgia. And so I called my cousins and I was like, hey, would you be okay if, a crew came and we came? They were like, oh, yeah, for sure. That video is the most Georgia thing I think I could possibly film. I mean, it's red clay, it's pine trees, and it's everything I love to do. I think the only thing we didn't put in there was fishing because it was too cold. That video, we really wanted it to represent like what I love and where I came from. And every piece of that video is me. I mean, the truck that I'm in is my granddad's old C10 Chevy. Like I said, the whole property we shot on is my cousin's. I'm really proud of that video. And I think it represents just about all of me and its visuals.
That's cool. The song Lose You, which is the first song on the album, has almost a Lumineers feel meets Avicii's Wake Me Up. Kind of reminds me of that a little bit too, that whole movement in that song. But it's like wrapped up in a country song. It's catchy as hell. And I think people will fall in love with that song as soon as they hear it. Can you talk a little bit about writing that song?
I don't write a lot of love songs, and I don't write a lot of love songs because I don't believe many love songs, especially in country. I think a lot of times they're too perfect. They're too sweet. And I don't know. I just don't buy them. And so for me, I was like, if we're going to write one, we got to write one that's like real and gritty. And it's just a story about the idea of the fact that you trade literally everything for someone if you found the right person. And for me, I've got my person, and she's my incredible wife who I moved here with Nashville, literally sight unseen apartment. We moved here. She held it down for 2 years in a terrible shoebox apartment. I wasn't making any money. She's kind of with me through the trenches. And now, things are starting to work. It was one of those moments where I was like, dadgum, like she literally gave up so much for me, what would I give up for her? And I think that was the inspiration behind the song. And we really wanted it to be super gritty and real. Like we didn't want it to be sugary sweet, and it's not. I mean, it's pretty honest. Yeah, and the instrumentation is just a blast. I mean, we had come with that kind of groove already built out, and then we just kind of kept chugging on it. And it was one of those things where it just felt so good in the demo. Like we hardly changed anything when we went and cut it. So yeah, I'm really proud of that song. And I think singing wise, it's one of my favorite live songs to do. Like we've been testing it out for these shows, and it's been so cool to see pretty much within the first chorus, people are like, oh, I can sing it. Like I can sing it back. So it's going to be really fun once it's out.
I Deserve a Heartbreak, your second single for the EP. It has a cool vibe with an honest look at a past relationship. I love the what goes around comes around because it kind of melody of it follows the lyrics. What percentage of when writing is coming from a place of true to life story? And can you talk a little bit about that song?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I mean, we try to operate at 90% truth. I mean, country music is like writing a novel. Usually it's like you want to start with a foundational truth, and then, certain details don't have to be exactly true. If I sing about driving a Chevy and I drive a Ford, it's not going to be the end of the world. But the major structure and the major inspiration for songs, I believe, in country should be true for you, for me. So that one is 100% true. I mean, this EP, the goal for this EP is for you to know who I am after you listen to it. And that doesn't mean just the good, it also means bad. And we wrote that song after talking through just the fact that like I have relationships in my past and I'm not proud of how I handled them. And we were trying to figure out a way to say that in a fresh way. And we kind of concluded like, hey, if I got what I deserve coming back to me from what I've dished out in some of these relationships, like I'd be kind of up the creek. And that was just a really honest angle for us to sing about. And for me, it just felt really true. And so, yeah, I mean, I operate, every song I'm writing is coming from me. It's coming from my stories. It's coming from my experiences. And I don't plan on changing that, especially in this genre. It's just, it feels the most honest. And it's also the way that I can make a sustainable career because I don't have to be somebody I'm not. And that song in particular, I Deserve a Heartbreak, just musically is like so much fun to play. And I even think somebody pointed out there's like a Blink 182 guitar lick in it that's totally by accident, but it's like, it definitely pulls from what I love to listen to outside of country. And so I'm really, really proud of that song. And it's a blast to play live. live.
I love that. Your song, Hole in My Heart, a couple of great lines from that song I love are, where the cigarette smoke is too thick to see you're gone, where I'm trying to fix this hole in my heart and this hole in the wall. I mean, I just love both those visuals, especially the one about the cigarette smoke being too thick to see that you're gone. That's really cool. Can you talk about that song and about the story behind that song?
Yeah, Hole in the Wall, we don't get a lot of moments as songwriters where something just falls out, but Hole in the Wall was a 30-minute write. It was me, Abram Dean, and Jimmy Robb. And Abram brought the idea, and he was like, I got this idea called Hole in the Wall. I don't know what it should be about. And I think Jimmy was like, where would you go when you're torn up about something? I'd go to the diviest, grungiest bar I could possibly find. Like, that's just who I am. Or I hate new stuff. I don't want to be in a new bar. I want to be in an old bar that smells like cigarette smokes and the tables are sticky and it's dark. Like, that's my favorite place to be. And so that one just fell out so easily. And all the color in it was, again, just describing where I would want to be in a moment like that. And for me, there's a place here in East Nashville called Dino's. I mean, it's the grungiest, most perfect dive bar you'll find. And that's the type of place that I love to be in. And when things go south in relationships, that's the place you'll find me. And so the Hole in the Wall was a quick write. And usually when things happen that fast, when you're writing, when they fall out that quickly, it's usually a good song. I found it's usually the right combination. And for whatever reason that day, that song just came out fast. And it was one of the first ones I was like, yeah, I've got to cut this song.
I feel like I recognize the name of that bar.
It's unbelievable. Good burgers.
Your song, She Didn't Have To. I do love the line, true north to a broken arrow. I don't know. That's just, I feel like that's one of those lines that just, sometimes there's ones you kind of think of and, you kind of push together. But I feel like that's one of those like inspired lines that I'm just like, it does kind of make sense, but it's a little different. And I love it. And taking the leaving out of my boots, I love that line too. What was the inspiration behind that song, She Didn't Have To?
Yeah, that was a very, very true moment. About 7 months into town, my girl wanted to go to church. It was a Sunday morning, and I was not in a good spot. I was working nights at a restaurant, trying to make money so I could write during the day. I was drinking too much. Nothing was happening with the writing. Like, I hadn't made any progress. Just a tough spot. And I remember she wanted to go to church. I was too torn up that morning to get out of bed. And I remember she left, and I sat on the edge of the bed just thinking about that. And I was like, man, like, she has stuck around for me in the worst moments. Not my life, but just trying to make a path for myself. And so that one was a moment where I was like, I came in that Monday after that had happened with my buddies, and I was like, hey, we've got to write this song. It's really truly about the fact that, like, she didn't have to stick around and she didn't have to tough this out with me. She didn't have to go through the ups and downs, but she did. Like I said, it's a love song, but it's a gritty love song. It's not shying away from the realities of what this is. And this business is tough. And I mean, I'm speaking from somebody barely in it. I've just started, and there's a lot put on the artist, but there's so much put on people around them and family members. A lot of credit goes to the people that sit beside you through this thing. And so, yeah, I absolutely love that song. That's one of my favorites I've ever written.
I love that story. That's great. So did you share it with her right after you wrote it?
I did. Yeah, because it's, I write a ton of breakup songs and a ton of fun bar songs, whatever. And yeah, when we come back with one that honest, I shared it to her, and yeah, she's the best. Yeah.
Your song, Cold Shoulder. Didn't think December could get any colder than that last look over your shoulder. Now that's a cool line. I think it took a moment for it to hit me, and then I listened to it a second or third time, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Talk a little bit about that one, kind of the inspiration behind that song.
Yeah, that one was one of those. I remember coming in to this write, I was like, I want to write a song that feels like a movie scene. Yeah, basically there was a girl back home that I thought I was going to marry for quite a while when I was still in town, and he picked music, and we changed paths. He went another direction, I went my way. But that whole relationship and that whole moment, one of the moments in sort of the ending of that was calling things off on one of the coldest nights I think South Georgia's ever had. And I remember thinking about how brutal of a decision that was, and I'm not proud of it, but I was trying to recount that moment and that night, and I was like, if we're going to do it, we have to paint it up, to where anybody that listens to this can see it. And so that's just a really simple recounting of that happening, and we wanted to paint it again like a movie scene. See the breath in the floodlights, and you see the frozen clay on the ground and the pine trees, the frozen branches falling off. So I'm really proud of that song. And it's one of the ones where it was genuinely, we finished that recording in one take. So the vocals are one take and the guitar is one take. And we didn't touch it. We didn't do anything to it. My producer and I were like, this has got to be a moment. And we didn't overthink it. And I feel like it's one of those on the project that is just a really vulnerable look at me. And instrumentally, it's just as stripped down as it can be.
Wow. Wow, one take.
Yeah.
That's awesome. The mood was just right.
It had to be because we got one shot.
Yeah. I find that interesting that you said you wanted it to be like a movie scene. That's one thing that when I was interviewing Gretchen Peters, that she said is that that's how she tries to write. So I love that concept.
Yeah, I think that's like, again, if we're thinking about country music as storytelling, some of the best storytelling is the most visual storytelling. I call it furniture. Like the more furniture I can get into country songs, so you think about Hole in the Wall, the cigarette smoke, and you can feel that. You know what that smells like. You know where that bar is. So that's like my big thing is if I'm going to describe a place or a moment, I'm going to try to do my best to get so specific in my writing that you listen to it and you know exactly where you are and you know what it smells like and you know what it looks like. And that's just a really special thing for me. And country music is so good at that at the highest level.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. One of my questions, and maybe that's the answer right there, but what do you think makes a great song?
I think honesty. I don't think there's anything else you need in a great song other than honesty and vulnerability. And I don't say that to be like hippy dippy. I mean, if you can't sing, it's probably not going to make a good song that people want to listen to. But let's say you can. Let's say you can sing a little bit and you can play a little bit. You don't have to be the best at those two things at all. You don't have to be the best player and you certainly don't have to be the best singer. But what you do have to do is you have to be the most honest and vulnerable, I think, to make a great record. And I think that's where people sort of in my opinion, miss this like beautiful opportunity to make something is they're like, oh, well, I can sing really well and project sounds really good. It's produced perfectly. And it's like, oh, those are great. Like all those elements are wonderful. But like, what are you saying? Like, what are you sharing? So for me, a great song is an honest, vulnerable song. And I think it doesn't matter what genre it is. It doesn't matter, how high level the producer was on it. That's to me what those requirements are.
That's awesome. You're touring with Nate Smith and Vincent Mason and have previously toured with Connor Smith and Logan Crosby. When you're on stage performing your songs, what do you hope the audience takes away from that performance?
I think my goal is to write music where when I play it live, it becomes theirs. So I want to give it to them and I want them to almost just take it. For me, the moment that I record and put out a song, it shouldn't be mine anymore. I don't mean that to be disrespectful to anybody that's precious with songs. I totally understand that. But for me, I'm not at all. My goal as a songwriter is to create it, and then the rest is for the fans. Like it always is for me, for the fans. And so live, I want them to be singing it, but even if they're not singing it, I want them to take it and connect with it to where when they walk out the door, that is theirs. Hopefully it helps them through stuff. It gives them hope. I think that's my goal for these songs live. It is just letting it be almost a transfer. Like, okay, I made this thing, but now I'm giving it to you, and I want you to have it. And that's the goal. And that's why, live shows are probably my favorite thing about this business.
And you got a lot of experience doing that when you were in college too. Well, Zach, I just want to thank you so much for being part of this interview and, sharing your story and telling us all about the story behind the songs. I really do appreciate it. I encourage everyone to go out and save the album Slow Down that's coming out because I know you're going to love it. Thank you so much, Zach.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you so much for listening to AmericanaMusic.com podcast. Be sure to go to AmericanaMusic.com and find playlists of the Americana artists we've interviewed here. Also, be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast platform.